All right, we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Can't hear anything? Now you can hear, it's okay? Beautiful. All right, guys, I'm just gonna pause for a minute. Still have a couple minutes before it officially starts, so I'll give people a chance to get on. So I'm gonna pause it if I can figure out how to do that. All right, guys, can you hear me okay? All right, so we can officially start. We have 5 participants. Let's see who's here. Oh, 4 participants, because that includes me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, awesome. And hopefully we'll have more people jumping on as we. Hey, how's it going? Hi, Mister. So did you guys already watch the videos as you were instructed to do? See, yep, yes, yes. I'm waiting on one more. Okay, good. Did you guys just watch the first video? Did anybody get into the second video, the optional additional videos? Nice, did both? Okay, not yet, no problem. So the videos from this week, we're dealing with periods 1 and 2 of the 6 periods that we study in AP World. Yeah, the homework was good. Awesome. Let me know what you liked about it. The more feedback I can get from you guys about what's working well, what's not working so well, what we can tweak. And there's only a few people on here right now, so you guys have a lot of my. Hey, a couple more people joined. Welcome, guys. You guys have my my attention and some pretty small student to teacher ratio, at least for now. So what you guys say, your input, your feedback is going to be the impact, is going to have the biggest impact. Those of you who are really participating and going the extra mile. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you for being on time. So we can just start in general. What are some questions that you guys have, primarily from periods 1 and 2, from the stuff that you guys reviewed? Hopefully you guys took some notes as you were, watching those videos and filling out the organizer. How did you guys like the organizer, by the way? Harappa, I love Harappa though. Was it just the word Harappa? So I'm going to try to do some screen sharing stuff with you guys as well, as this is my first time using it. So of the ancient river valley civilizations, Harappa is definitely my favorite one. The name Harappa might not be as familiar to you guys as its other, probably more commonly used name, the Indus River Valley civilization. Harappa sounds more collegey. That's really as much as there is to it. So in the Indus River Valley civilization, it was the largest of the early river valley civilizations. You guys know some of the other early river valley civilizations? Reach back into your mind. Let's see who gets it first. Give me any other. Okay, Nile River, good. What's the civilization along the Nile that you're most familiar with? Come on, who can say it first? All right, so Egypt is the obvious one, right? For AP, they like Nubia. Nubia is further south from Egypt. Let me see if I can. I'm going to see if I can pull up some nice images for you guys. Nile, Egypt, Nubia. So Nubia is a civilization to the south of Egypt. If you look in your textbooks, you'll see a good amount of detail about that as well. Your textbooks go into extensive detail. They're very heavy on the 9th grade stuff. So the good thing about that is if you want to go back and review 9th grade with your textbook, it's a very thorough resource. Let's see if I can pull this up. It's not a great image. There we go. That's a pretty good one. So this is during the New Kingdom. So I'm going to try to figure out how I can share this screen with you guys. But Nubia is in the south, and Egypt is further north. Second, I lost you guys. There you are. So Mesopotamia, nice. Thank you very much. Mesopotamia is the other civilization along the what rivers? The what rivers, guys? Mesopotamia? I know you got this. Tigris and Euphrates, very good. So you have the Nile River Valley civilization, which is Egypt and Nubia, and you have the Mesopotamian civilizations. They were conquered so many times because largely because their geography doesn't provide a lot of natural barriers. But the biggest one, and we also have in China a little bit later, but usually grouped in together, the Shang dynasty and the Xia and the Shang dynasties in China around the Yellow River. Those are the 4 big ones that everyone tends to think of. The Indus River Valley was the largest of all of them. It was really advanced in a lot of ways. The 2 biggest cities, somebody said Mohenjo-Daro, I see that, and the other one was Harappa. So those are the 2 biggest cities that have been at least discovered. And so in order to give the Indus Valley civilization a name beyond the name of the river, it's often referred to as the Harappan civilization, but it's talking about the exact same place. So did you have specific questions about the Indus Valley civilization, about the Harappan civilization? Anything specific about it? Just want me to talk about it? As I'm waiting for some more specific question, one of the things that's really worth noting about the Harappan civilization is that they traded with the Mesopotamian civilization in particular. We know because we found Harappan seals, those small clay pieces, tokens, probably used for trade, to indicate the contents of trade shipments or something along those lines. We found them in Mesopotamia. So we know that there was trade going on there. There was also trade going on between Mesopotamia and Egypt, between Egypt and Nubia, throughout the Mediterranean in that early period one, even before 600, right, during the Bronze Age. There was a really thriving trade taking place and a kind of interconnected civilization in that Eastern Mediterranean, Middle Eastern area. There's a famous event called the Bronze Age collapse when for a number of reasons, it's somewhat mysterious to historians. There was a lot going on. There were probably invasions, environmental disasters, and things along those lines, as well as the advent of iron technology, roughly around that time. That led to a collapse of a lot of civilizations there. You could check out a John Green video he did in his second world history course, called the Collapse of Civilization in the 12th century. And there's other resources as well on that. But you can see some of the interconnectedness of some of those civilizations. Other things to know about the Harappan civilization is they were very technologically advanced. Their largest, and you guys might remember this from the John Green video last year, their largest, in Mohenjo-daro, the largest building was the Great Bath. That was possibly used for religious purposes. And they had very organized cities, so seemed to be planned cities. Grid-like structure to their streets, standardized weights and measures, indoor plumbing, which is like a really big deal because we don't see things like that until the Roman period, centuries and centuries later. They're probably also, one of the reasons we know so little about them is because their writing has never been deciphered. We do have plenty of their writing, but we cannot read it. So hopefully in my lifetime, in your lifetime, it'd be pretty cool to see if the writing system for the Indus Valley civilization could be deciphered, and maybe we'll learn a lot more about them. We haven't found a Rosetta Stone for that. I don't know if that answered your question. It was kind of a broad thing about Harappa. Is there anything specific about Harappa? If not, anybody just hit it up with the question as I try to figure out screen sharing. Let's see, how do I do screen sharing? But you can hit it up with the questions now. Anything more? All right. Let's pull up some info here. So I want to get this screen share thing going. So give me a sec, guys. I'm getting that set up. I want to see if I can give you guys a map here too, so it can help out a little bit. As I'm getting that up, Chavin is one of the early civilizations in the Americas. So when we look at those early civilizations, they, especially because with AP World, we really want to make sure that they're broadening the focus to make sure that we're hitting the entire world as much as possible. So the Chavin culture is from South America, in the Andes region, in more or less what's today Peru. The other one that they tend to focus on is the Olmec civilization in southern Mexico and part of Central America. Those are one of the those are two of the early civilizations that, you know, when we talk about some of those general themes that we look at in early civilizations, development of agriculture, and you know, they kind of lay the groundwork in the Americas for the civilizations that come after. We talk about in the later period, in the post-classical period, there's probably the two most famous civilizations that you guys think of when you think of the Americas. What's the first civilization you think of when you think of South America, particularly the Andes? And what's the first civilization you think of when you think about Mexico? Mm-hmm. So Aztec for Mexico. What about for South America? So yeah, Incan, very good. So Mayan is also a big one. Mayan was a little bit earlier, also in southern Mexico and parts of Central America. So you know, the Chavan culture in South America kind of leads the way. Some of those early developments in Andean civilization that lead to other cultures like the Nazca, the Moche, or Mochica, and then eventually to the Incas. In the same way that the Aztec, you know, goes from Olmec, a little more straight line, but Olmec to the Maya, and then to the Aztecs. You know, they're each building on each other's technology and developments, and the way that they adapt to those environments. The development of the potato crop in South America, the development of maize, corn in Central America, Mexico. You know, those were some of the big developments that happened early on. And I think your textbook can go into even more detail in looking at some of those early civilizations. I don't think there's going to be a ton on your test that's like really detailed about the Olmec and the Chavan cultures. You know, there's definitely some details you can go over, but I think the key things are going to be, you know, when it comes to these early civilizations, it's really about comparative, like what do they have in common? You know, we have that focus on agriculture. With the development of agriculture, the idea of being able to develop a surplus. A lot of the cultures share a focus on so for example, with their religions tend to focus on agriculture, focus on the seasons. They're, you know, very often deities, gods and goddesses related to the harvest, the focus on making sure there's rain. So different cultures and different customs, different traditions, but we see that kind of overlap, the cyclical nature of religion, of birth and death and rebirth that goes along with the idea of seasons, is very much influenced by the agriculture, and a lot of those kind of like little comparisons that you can make. Yeah, I don't know if that fits in what your question was. Feel free to ask follow-up questions. I want to see if I can pull up the map for you guys so you can see where the Chavan culture existed. Let me see if I can get. So they were in Peru from 900 BCE to 200 BCE. Let's see if I can pull up some nice things for you guys. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so now I think you guys can see what I'm seeing, right? How's that working? I hope that you guys can see this. So the Chavan culture is over here. So if you look at modern day Peru, this is the area of the Chavan culture and Chavan influence that extends further than that. So I mentioned Nazca as well. And the Incan civilization later would spread even further. Yeah, this is, there you go. This is the Inca civilization during different periods, different rulers. But you can see how this was like that original homeland, that original center of it. And then it's, you know, going to spread even further under the Inca, but that's going to be a long time later because the Inca are pretty much during the late Middle Ages. You can see some of the art and architecture from this culture, right? That's going to definitely have an influence on those that came after, the development of temples. There's often a focus on the sun and the moon. That's much later. This is Inca's Machu Picchu. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a visual. Let me see if I got any more questions here. All right. A bit choppy. The sound or the the explanation? Hey, Qin Shi Huangdi. Was he good or bad? I mean, it really depends on your point of view. Are you, if you believe in the importance of a really strict government to keep people in line, we talk about later on in history, we talk about the Enlightenment philosophers, we talk about Thomas Hobbes, who kind of stood out from the pack as a defender of absolutism, and he believed that people were, really just awful and left to their own devices would behave badly. And so we need a strong government, a strong force to keep us in line, to keep us behaving civilly. Otherwise, it'll descend into chaos and people won't be able to live well. So Shi Huangdi really was the ideology that was behind him was legalism. And it was all about, keeping things very strict. He wanted to eliminate any alternative ideologies. So there was a, persecution of Confucians and other philosophies as well. There are probably many philosophies and ideologies that existed prior to the Qin dynasty that no longer, we don't have records of. Confucianism survived and thrived following the Qin dynasty. Remember, the Qin dynasty under Shi Huangdi was very short. So it was, they did a lot, but they were not, they didn't last for a very long time. Let's pull up a nice picture of him so I can share with you guys so we have a visual to connect with. There he is. So he's really somebody who, so the things that he's famous for are the terracotta soldiers, which were discovered after his death. He was buried with these clay soldiers to protect him in the afterlife. He is famous for the building of the Great Wall. There were initially some walls originally built before him, and the Great Wall we see today was not actually built under his rule. The Great Wall we see today was built primarily during the Ming Dynasty, much later on in 1400s. But his claim to fame is, in a very short amount of time, he was able to centralize his control over China, consolidate his power. China has a long history of being controlled by local warlords. So, I mean, it's kind of a bias that when we talk about China, we use the term warlords. When we talk about Europe, we usually use the term landlords or lords, but it's essentially the same general process. It's a feudal thing. It's a decentralization where you have local rulers who have power, who have soldiers, who have land, have some authority, dominating a particular region of China. And for many different periods in history, whenever those big dynasties break up and collapse, usually in the interim, sometimes longer than others, you have this period where it kind of devolves into decentralized rule, and you have warlords, local rulers who rule over different parts of China, sometimes breaking up into smaller dynasties, and then somebody will come in and unite the whole thing. So Qin Shi Huangdi really was the first to fully centralize China in a way that it wasn't under the Zhou dynasty. Under the Zhou dynasty, it was they had a dynasty, but there was a lot more power in the hands of the local lords. So he was the first to centralize it, and the Qin was the name of the dynasty that gives its name to China, the country. The second dynasty after him was the Han dynasty, and they were much longer lasting. And I guess we can stop sharing this. They were much longer lasting under the Han dynasty. They lasted for about 4 centuries with some interruptions, and they did a lot of laying the groundwork for Chinese culture, Chinese political systems. I see somebody wrote something about centralization in civil service exams. Civil service exams really was a big deal in the Han Dynasty. They had started in the Han Dynasty. They were picked up again and taken even further during the Tang Dynasty, perhaps during the Sui Dynasty, but I don't think they started up quite then. So we have the Qin Dynasty and the Han Dynasty are both during that classical period, during period 2, right? The 600 to 600. The Qin Dynasty was short-lived, and it was around the 200s BCE. And then you have the Han Dynasty, which is from the 200s BCE to the 200s CE, so about 400 years. And that goes into most of the Roman period. So the height of the Roman Empire is during the Han Dynasty in China. That's when we see that, hey, Silk Road, literally just saying the Silk Road. When we see the Silk Road taking place, on one end, I should probably use this hand, on one end is Han China, on the other end is the Qin Dynasty. So one end is the Han Dynasty and one end is the Roman Empire. See if we can pull up a Silk Road picture for you guys. So here we go. It's a nice one. Oh, this is a very artistic one. So during the Han Dynasty, that's when we see the establishment of Confucianism as the guiding philosophy of the state. Pretty much after the Han Dynasty, when we go into the post-classical age and beyond, really up until what we've talked about recently under Sun Yat-sen with the ending of the Qing Dynasty and the establishment of the Republic of China, really for most of that time, from Han until then, Confucianism was the basis of political thought in China. There are always going to be additional influences, but Confucianism really became the foundation. And the big things that role that played was Confucianism focuses heavily on order in society. So your Chinese philosophies during that period were legalism, right, which we saw under Qin Shi Huangdi, which was very focused on strictness, the rule of law, government control. Confucianism is all about social order. So a lot of the focus is on keeping it order. And of course, we're oversimplifying, right? But this is the basic idea. It focuses on bringing order to society and the 5 relationships, right? The filial piety of that kind of respect between superiors and inferiors. So the parent to the child, the husband to the wife, of course, they were patriarchal. They saw the husband as superior to the wife. The older brother to younger brother. This idea of throughout society, there's a hierarchy. That's good. Everybody has their place. Everybody has their role. Everybody has their responsibility. And that's one of the reasons why in Chinese culture, historically, merchants were actually viewed as less. They had power because they had wealth, but on the social hierarchy, farmers were ranked higher. They were seen as a higher role in society. They were more highly respected because the idea was farmers put in the work. They work hard. They are the backbone of this country. They provide for us, whereas merchants are people who just kind of go back and forth trading other people's things. They don't produce. They're just trying to make an extra buck by taking something from here and bringing it over here and charging a fee. So because of Confucianism, because of their way of seeing things, seeing the value that everybody added to society, they felt like merchants didn't bring that value. They also, one of the benefits or one of the roles that Confucianism played in Chinese society in the Han Dynasty, and again, this carries on into the post-classical period 3, is the importance of meritocracy, that people should work in government who are qualified to work there. And that's when we see the development of these civil service exams, tests that people would take to join the civil service. Another word for civil service is bureaucracy, right? Basically working for the government. If you have a big centralized state and you want to have control, you want to keep things in order, you want to keep things consolidated and stable, then you need a lot of different people working for your government. So bureaucracy is not a style of government like democracy, autocracy, monarchy. It's just the fact that your government has a lot of different people doing a lot of different things. Another word for that is the civil service. So people would take an exam to make sure they're qualified. But what were they taking an exam on? Mostly Confucian philosophy. So the way to see if you're qualified was to give you a test your knowledge. But the knowledge they expected you to know, that they believed made you qualified for government work, was that you were an expert in Confucian philosophy. I don't know what grandfather says. How did religion spread on the Silk Road? I mean, there's this, I guess a simple answer to that is there's going to be a lot of cultural diffusion, right? The three big religions that really spread a lot on the Silk Road, and while the Silk Road extends into the post-classical period, I think what we're really talking about is this classical Silk Road. So we have Buddhism, we have Christianity, we have Manichaeism, which is, I think, another one of those kind of less popular but important topics that the AP might, they might decide to touch on that. They expect that you at least are familiar with it enough that you don't go, huh, what's that? So we have Christianity obviously emerging from the Middle East. The area of Palestine under Roman rule was Judea. We have Jesus of Nazareth, who was the focal point of that religion and the originator of its core philosophies, as well as Paul, who played a very important role in developing Christianity and what its teachings would be, what its theology would be, the importance of. So there were a lot of early Christianities, a lot of different versions of Christianity that existed that had widely differing beliefs. Of course, there's a lot of different versions of Christianity today, but they're much more closely aligned than some of what existed during the early days of the church. Paul was instrumental in developing the version or the form of Christianity that became mainstream. One of the most important things that he did, not a positive or negative, but an impact, is he kind of decoupled Christianity from Judaism. Judaism was a small religion. It had a lot of different rules and regulations. Some of the most famous are the dietary restrictions, right? The laws of kosher. So no pork, right? No mixing meats and dairies and things like that. And then the other one that was a really big deal was the issue of circumcision, which to convert to Judaism for men were required to be circumcised. And Paul really brought Christianity beyond the Jewish community by taking away those restrictions and saying that you don't have to follow the law of the Torah anymore, in the way that those who were practicing Jews did. And you, as long as you believed according to his explanation of the Christian teachings, as long as you believed that Jesus was your Lord and he died for your sins, etc., then you were pretty much covered. And that really allowed Christianity, because of the limited expectations or the limited requirements to become a Christian, it allowed it to spread really widely throughout the Roman Empire. But it also spread in other directions as well. Egypt was a really important early center of Christianity. A lot of the early fathers of monasticism, of being a monk, the practice of being a monk really emerged in Egypt. It also spread into the East, and there were Eastern versions of Christianity that didn't really fall under Paul's influence as much, or the influence of the church controlled by the Roman Empire, such as Nestorian Christianity, and that was still around as a fairly large population during the Mongol times. I believe either Genghis Khan's wife or Kublai Khan's wife was a Nestorian Christian. I think it was Kublai Khan's wife. And so that was a popular religion in the East. Buddhism, of course, spreads from northern India around what is today Nepal, and it had been spread through India earlier by the ruler Ashoka, who was the ruler of the Mauryan dynasty down here. And then he ended up sending, so Buddhism originated around this area near the Himalayan mountains in northeastern India. And then it spread throughout India through not only by efforts by Ashoka, but he played an important role in spreading the religion with his edicts of Ashoka. And then it went even further, flowing up into this region over here, the Central Asian region, when India was conquered by the Kushan Empire. When India was under the Kushan Empire, they controlled northern India, but they also controlled Central Asia. And once Buddhism got into Central Asia, it picks up on, of course, the Silk Road. And so it's going to make its way east and eventually reach China, and then later further to, kind of going off the screen, to Korea and Japan. And Buddhism really reached China during the period of disunion following the Han Dynasty's collapse in the 200s. Buddhism had already been in China during the Han Dynasty, but it really started to spread during that period when there was such a absence of political control and stability, that one of the reasons that it said that Buddhism spread was because it, it offered people hope, and in times of instability, religion can be a force of bringing people a sense of stability, a sense of hope, a sense of my life stinks right now, but there's something greater beyond this that I can look forward to. And that also played a role in the spread of Christianity, perhaps in the Roman Empire, because they were also going through a collapse of their society, and at the same time Rome was collapsing, Christianity was growing. Manichaeism is a religion that developed in Persia, and it's less popular it's not less famous today. It's virtually non-existent today, but actually in its time it was one of the major religions of the world, and was kind of in the middle between Christianity and Buddhism. It was a major contender and competition for those two religions in terms of gaining converts. And if you were just looking at, let me see if I can get a map for you guys to show you Manichaeism, because it's surprising to see how much of the world actually practiced this religion that today is basically not existent. See if I can get a map for you guys. Not a ton of good maps on this, but it's spread throughout Central Asia, Iran, into the northern part of China, and even into the Roman Empire as well. There was quite a bit of, this one's all right. And there were different types of Manichaeism, but it was, let's see. There was some connection to Zoroastrianism and ancient Persian religions, but he kind of combined already existing philosophies. And let's see if I can share that with you guys so you can see the map. There you go. So there's the areas of, it's not to say that everybody in that area practiced Manichaeism, but you can see that it spread basically from Rome to China. And if you look at what area that is, it's essentially the Silk Road. So Buddhism and Christianity outcompeted Manichaeism, and then eventually, when Islam is introduced in the 600s, you'll eventually see Islam kind of overcome that area and become the dominant religion in the region, and Manichaeism kind of just fades out. I saw a question about the Paleolithic era. Can you explain the Paleolithic era? It stated that the egalitarianism was important, but I don't understand the term. Can you explain the term and how it was involved in the changes of nomadic groups in the Paleolithic era? So egalitarianism essentially just means equality. If you think about the Neolithic revolution, the birth of farming, in the very beginning of 9th grade, we talked a lot about was the development of farming a positive or a negative change for humanity, right? Would we have been better off if we all lived as hunter-gatherers and lived off the land? And, when we look at things that are going on in the world today, when it comes to climate change and pollution and all the plastic in the ocean, it could be easy to say, sure, yeah, we should have just stayed as hunter-gatherers. Some of the bigger things, though, over the course of history that we really look at is the evils of agriculture. The first that comes to mind is slavery, right? Pretty much as soon as you introduce agriculture, you start getting a surplus. You want to maintain that surplus. You want to figure out ways to increase that surplus further, because as your surplus grows, generally your population grows to the point where it's not really a surplus anymore. But if you've gotten used to living with a surplus, where Not everybody needs to farm. So let's just kind of go back over the steps. Once we develop farming, people have a new source of food, right? Before that, they had to hunt, they had to gather for everything that they ate. Once we develop farming, it starts out as out of desperation rather than inspiration. People are looking for an alternative because they don't have enough food, and they start experimenting with farming as a way to just get a little bit more food on the side. But eventually it becomes kind of a dominant way to produce food because it's more reliable, not totally reliable, but at least more reliable, especially if your climate is declining, if the climate is not great and not providing that food for you automatically, right, naturally, then you have to artificially go in and get that food to grow. There's not enough rain to help the grasses and wheats and barleys grow, then you need to bring water yourself and take over for nature, right? So that's when you get things like irrigation systems. It starts out small with little channels and, bringing water from a river or, another water source to your crops. Then it develops into large scale systems. Two that are popular are on the EP is the qanat and the shaduf, as systems that were used to transport water. Shaduf was used in Egypt. Qanat was used by the Persians, a system of bringing water to your crops. The shaduf is kind of, let me see if I can pull up a picture of shaduf. Of course, we know the aqueducts in the Roman Empire, but these are a little bit more, let's get a shaduf, it's a great word. They're still used in some places. This is what we're talking about here. So we can see right there, this kind of water systems for bringing water to your crops. Right, basically like a bucket, and it would go in and bring water up. See another one right here. That way it's easier to do. Let's see if we can get the qanat. So here we go. A way of bringing water to the crops by tapping into underground water sources, right? And being able to bring that out in an area like Persia where it's somewhat dry, they can access that deeper water and bring it out to that irrigated land that you see right there. But all of these, wonderful developments, when you start figuring out how we can produce more food, an easy way, a simple way, kind of a cheating way, but people like to cheat, is slavery. Just take people, hold them against their will, and force them to do work for you that you don't want to do. If you think about the world we live in today, this post-industrial world, and even more so post-technological world, we have, it's kind of weird to say, but we have digital, we have mechanical slaves, right? The things, what I mean to say is the things that the luxuries that we enjoy today that are provided for us through technology, through machinery, through digital things. If somebody wanted to have the same things in their life in the ancient world, even in the pre-modern world, the pre-industrial world, it would probably require either slavery or a massive amount of paid labor, which probably only somebody like a king could actually do, right? Could actually have. Think about the things that we have today. You want to be entertained instantly, you can go on your iPad, you can pull up a Netflix show, you have entertainment for you instantly. That kind of immediate access to entertainment is not a normal thing throughout history. Who in history could say, I want to be entertained, I want a performance to happen right in front of me right now? That's something only a king could do. And the people who'd be doing that, not necessarily slaves, but they would be people who, had to be hired to do that. So when you think about farming today, the kind of food that we produce, we have fertilizer, we have tractors, we have all these things. We, of course, still have people doing hard agricultural labor, but how much less it requires of human labor today, right? At that time, to produce farming output, very regularly we see throughout civilizations was the use of slavery. Another evil that comes out of farming is inequality. And this kind of goes to your question. You asked about egalitarianism, right? If you have a system of farming, you start with everybody's a farmer. Even in Paleolithic societies, even in hunter-gatherer societies, in a small band of hunter-gatherers, there was usually somebody who was a leader, but it was a very minimal leadership role. It was just somebody who's the chief or the head, the headman of that family unit. And everybody pretty much was on the same page because they were in such small communities. There was a lot of equality between everybody. But when you have a much larger community, when you go from a band to a settled village, and then a village turns into a town, and then a town turns into a city states, right? Like we see in Mesopotamia. And then those can turn into a small kingdom, right? Like we see under, and when you look at early ancient Egypt, if you look at the Akkadians, some call the first empire, first kingdom, it's getting bigger. And so you need people doing more things. So the first farmers, everybody had to farm. It was the only way you could produce enough food. But when they start getting better at it, when they develop things like irrigation, when they develop, some of those technologies, when they develop better techniques, technologies, plows, things like that, they can help produce more food, then they're going to get a surplus, which means not everybody needs to farm. So if not everybody needs to farm, then they can do other useful tasks for this growing society. What do you call that, where you have different people doing different jobs? Not everybody has to farm. What is that term for everybody doing different jobs? Specialized labor. Specialization of labor, job specialization, exactly. But if you have job specialization, then the value of a person who is a guard, right? Somebody who's, the early form of a soldier who protects the crops, who protects that village. If there's only a couple of them, 2 or 3 or 4, and the majority of people are farming, who's going to be more highly valued by that society? The individual farmer or the individual soldier? Anybody? I'll say that again. So who would be more valuable to the society? Who would people respect more? Who would they feel they needed more? One farmer or one soldier? Yeah, the soldier, right? So that person then has a higher status than the farmer. As you have more job specialization, you get a ranking of people. And what do we call that system? You go from job specialization to what? So social hierarchy, social stratification, it's another word for it. So you guys saw that, I think, in your homework. So that social stratification means a social inequality, right? Not everybody is going to be seen as equally valuable in the society. So you have inequality because of that. In the same way that you have that social inequality that emerges from farming, you don't have egalitarianism anymore. You also have, so that's social inequality. You also have gender inequality because, and this is more true in places where more fighting takes place. When they have more wars, we tend to see more patriarchy. So patriarchy is an important term. Type that in the thing, patriarchy. This idea of basically males having more authority, more power, more prestige, more respect in the society than females. Why would that be? This one's a little harder to track than the social inequality. That one's more of a straightforward thing. There's a couple of factors that contribute to patriarchy. So one of them I said is military. The fact is that when communities are very much engaged in warfare, if they're constantly under attack, then they have more soldiers. And the soldiers become more important in their society because of the value they bring. The soldiers tend to be male. it's not just an issue of physical strength, but also, and this is the other big part of it, is the fact that between men and women, right, women can get pregnant and men cannot, right? Women give birth, they carry a child for 9 months. That, especially in ancient societies, pre-modern societies, is going to be a major impediment, a major obstacle when it comes to participating in military. So it's probably just not going to happen, right? Very often, at least. And quickly, men are going to assume the role as the soldiers, the physical protectors. Women also tend to be the child. Since they bear the child, they also tend to raise the child, right? When it comes to feeding a child, they didn't have formula back then, right? For small children, only women can do that. And so that was seen as the women's role. Of course, that was also true in Paleolithic times, right? But the difference here is the scale. We've grown so big now. We can't just have a couple people doing the protection sometimes. We need a very organized system where everybody has a set role. We can keep track of it. So that scale, that size that we get with farming means that we tend to generalize because it's quicker, it's more efficient. And so who's going to do the fighting? The men. We don't have time to say, oh, this particular woman could do. No. It's too complicated. We need simple way of doing things. This is who's going to do it. We're not going to change it every 5 minutes. The men are the fighters. And then because they're the ones who do that fighting and women don't have that role, of course, they have a less public role because they're at home. Men become more valued in society. They have more physical power, literally because they're running the army. If women are never running the army and men are always running the military, then they're the ones with the weapons. They're the ones calling the shots, right? When we talk about state formation, a lot of different theories about state formation at the scholarly level, but a big part of it is, why do we have states? Why do we have governments? A big part of it is control and the threat of force to the threat of force, right? There was a John Green video on Rethinking Civilization where he talks about one particular scholar who basically is saying that, we don't have that civilization is not a positive, it's a negative, and that we are all kind of trapped in these societies that force us to be part of them and control us by the threat of force. Either it's, if you're outside the society, it's the soldier, right? That if someone's attacking, then the soldier attacks them. But within the society, it's the police or the whatever internal kind of controlling body there is that uses the threat of force to keep people in control. This is just one different theory or philosophy behind the idea of the state, but that does play an important role in it. And generally, it's men throughout history who have been in the seat of control. And so that's why Paleolithic times, because life was simpler, there tended to be more equality. When you bring it on a large scale, that's not going to happen unless, and hopefully today we see some improvement on this, but it takes like a very concerted effort to avoid falling into that trap of social inequality, gender inequality, because it's the easier thing to do. It's not the better thing, but it's the easier thing to do. And so that's why we have like laws to try to protect people from gender, to try to address gender inequality, to rebalance that imbalance that is a byproduct of the structure of our civilization. And the same with social inequality. We don't always do a great job enforcing those laws, or maybe we could make better laws to do it better. But that's kind of the idea behind it. Give me more questions, guys. I'm talking too long. Don't feel you can't interrupt me. I'm just going because I don't have anything else to talk about. We have 13 people on right now. We've been talking a lot about period one. Period one only makes about 5% of your test. 15% of your test roughly is the period two. We talk about the Greeks. We could talk about the Romans, Persians, China, India. What do you find kids mess up most on the exam? I mean, that's a really big question. Are you talking about content or are you talking about skills? I think, we need to do a lot of work with skills. If you have skills questions too, you can ask them. Um, hopefully in class, we're going to be doing, I want to focus a lot more on skills practice because I think that's the more hands-on thing. When it comes to content, we can just talk, you can read, you can review information about history. You need skills, don't we all? So I think one thing I would recommend that you guys do, since we're on here anyway, and I can share a screen with you. Let me do that right now, actually. Is to get more acquainted with the exam itself. This is something we've definitely, you've seen this before, but especially as we're getting close to the exam, to kind of, is this going to be in the way? No. To kind of start looking at what that looks like. So if you go to my website, and you go to about, you can click on AP World Exam, AP World Course Framework, AP World Course Overview. But let's just look at the exam one. I already have it up somewhere. I thought I did. The exam. So you can see kind of what to expect. And that's why I really encourage you guys to go to that practice exam on May 4th, because it's going to be, you've done all these things in pieces. You've never done them all together back to back. So we have multiple choice, 55 questions, 55 minutes. So as much as we talk about how it stinks that you guys feel rushed sometimes with the questions, and the questions at the end of the test tend to be the ones that people do the worst on. You really do have only a minute per question on average when it comes to the multiple choice, and that's 40% of your exam score. So you really want to rock those multiple choice. And one strategy is, if you know that there's a chance you're not going to answer every question, don't go in order and figure out, you have to be strategic about it. What questions are going to make the most sense for me to answer? Which questions am I most likely to get right? So you can see, right, questions appear in sets of 2 and 5, and they always come with a document. We've talked so many times about the fact that very often the question has very little or nothing to do with the document, and the document is there. So if you have 4 questions, maybe one of them is very specifically to the document and is going to ask you to pull something from that text. But the other 3 could just be related to the same topic that the document is about. And then it could be some other completely unrelated thing that they just connect in together. The point is that they want to make it seem like everything is about a document, but it really isn't, because people who make tests like to just ask you a lot of questions. And so even though they're trying to show, look how everything is document based, it isn't necessarily. And so they're going to try to find ways to sneak that in. So essentially, they're going to be asking you a lot of questions about different parts of history. If you can avoid reading a document, which takes a lot of time, then you should avoid doing that. If you have questions that appear in sets of 2 to 5, if you need to read a document, read one that will get you 5 questions. If you have a document and 2 questions and it looks like a really rough document and you're only going to get 2 questions out of it, maybe come back to that. If it's about a topic that you don't really know that well and you see another one that's 5 questions to a document, why don't you read that document, because you have 5 questions that that document can answer for you. So that's one strategy you can do with that. When it comes to the short answer questions, so you have 40 minutes to answer 3 short answer questions. That's 20% of your score. So you get 3, right? You get 2 that are required, and then the last one you get to pick. So the first 2 are going to be between periods 3 and 6. So everything that you just did in your review this weekend, I intentionally started with the lighter one so you guys could get the hang of it. And as we go forward, we'll get to the more relevant and more intense topics. But question 1 and question 2 will always be from periods 3 through 6. So it's never going to be a question in those first 2 that's related to the early civilizations or the classical civilizations. It's always going to be after 600, right? Middle Ages and forward. The last question, you get a pick between 2, and it's either one from periods 1 through 3 or from periods 4 through 6. And depending on which one you like more, you can pick the one you want to do. Then you have the essays. So section 2, part A and B, you have your DBQ essay and you have your LEQ, right? For the DBQ essay, you just, whatever you get, you get. You're going to get one question. You have an hour to do it. They say a 15-minute reading period. So basically, you have 15 minutes to get those documents figured out, get to the bottom of them, figure out how you're going to structure your essay, and then you should be able to write the whole thing in 45 minutes. The DBQ essay is always periods 3 to 6. So if you think about like the one you guys did last year, even, that's why I waited until period 3 to give you a DBQ essay, because there aren't, they don't generally give DBQ essays on topics from the Roman Empire or the Mesopotamians, right? We did one on the reaction to the spread of Buddhism in China. For the LEQ essay, you obviously, there's no documents. It's based just from your knowledge. And you're going to choose from 3 options. So you get one option from period 1 to 2, an option from period 3 to 4, and an option from period 5 to 6. And you pick the one that you think works best for you. So you do get a little bit of control on the test, which is nice. And, think as you're preparing, just be thinking about what those, let me see. I feel like, so I'm getting some questions, not in the chat, but in the Q&A section. I saw the one about Paleolithic already, so get rid of that one. I feel like Greek and Roman history is a topic I can't seem to grasp. So it says anonymous attendee, so I don't know who that was, but what is it that you feel that you cannot grasp about Greek and Roman history that I could hopefully clarify for you? Greeks, Romans are a classic. Get it? Kind of winding down for today. I can extend a little bit if you guys have additional questions. If whoever that was with the Greek and Roman, I'd love to answer if you have something specific. I guess I can go off a little bit on just a brief summary. Greeks and Romans definitely connected to each other in their civilization. The Greeks come first. Their civilization develops what we consider the classical Greek civilization. We often associate with Athens, the city of Athens, where democracy was born. They're also famous for many of their philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and the architecture, the Parthenon. But a lot of what they developed, and you guys, I think, remember, I think a lot of what you guys remember is connected to the Delian League. I think that you guys knew that pretty well last year. After the Persian Wars, the Greeks fought off the Persians, and the Delian League developed, where Athens was at the head of it and wanted to protect from future Persian attacks, but ultimately used that as an opportunity to seize power and control a lot of the Greek world. Ended up with a civil war between Athens and Sparta and their respective allies that really just weakened Greece. And it's not long after the Greeks were conquered by Alexander the Great. Well, technically conquered by his father Philip, but ultimately by Alexander the Great, who extended that empire far into the east, into Persia, and all the way to India and Egypt as well. So that culture that's so famous with Greece really developed in a relatively short period. Most of the height of it, I should say, was in Athens during the time when they were dominating much of the Greek world and exploiting them and taking their wealth. That's how you get the money to do fancy things like art and philosophy and architecture and comedy and tragedy and things like that. But it was Alexander the Great who kind of took that civilization, took that culture, and spread that. Which way did it go for you guys? I think it was this way. And spread that to Persia and the wider world. And that was what we call the Hellenistic period, right? That Hellenization of the East, bringing Greek language and Greek culture all the way to India, Greco-Bactrian kingdom in modern-day Afghanistan and Central Asia. The Romans at that same time are starting to develop in the city of Rome in central Italy. And as Alexander the Great's empire is falling apart, right? That's when the Romans are kind of growing at that same time. So the Greek world had this big burst of, it had its big flourishing of culture under Athens. A century or two later, it had this growth of expansion and conquest under Alexander. And as Alexander's empire falls into pieces and those pieces fight each other, the Romans then emerge in Italy, eventually take over all of Italy, eventually spread to Spain, to North Africa, with taking over territory from Carthage, then spread east into the Greek world, Macedonia to the north, and eventually by the time of Caesar, this is all during the Roman Republic, by the way. Most of this early expansion was before they were ever an empire with an emperor, but they were imperial in their conquest, even as a republic. By the time, as they start getting bigger, they start to conquer more and more places. And I don't know if I can go into more detail if you guys want, but for a variety of reasons, it leads them into a system where there is too much instability. There are civil wars. There's a lot of social inequality, actually plays a major role in the collapse of the republic. The upper class and the lower classes at each other's throats. And ultimately, dictatorship. And this really connects. And this is why I tell you guys, like last year, you go, what the heck is the point of this? Why do I have to learn about this stuff? Romans. This really connects to what we've talked about with so many of these revolutions that we've seen in like the Cold War era, right? When you have a revolution, when you have fighting between groups in a country, civil conflict, it causes, total instability. And more often than not, you don't end up with a stable democracy coming out of that. You end up with a strong leader who comes in and says, don't worry, I will settle all this. I will make sense of this. I will bring back order to society. They're given power or they take it, and you end up with a form of dictatorship, right? And what you ended up with in Rome was the empire, was the rule of, not of Caesar, because he, got killed, but his grandnephew and adopted heir, Augustus, who became the first emperor of Rome. And they maintained the illusion of a republic. They kept the Senate in place. They kept the structures, the system in place. But for all intents and purposes, it was basically a monarchy, though they never called it that. But the culture that they had was very influenced by the Greeks, because the Greeks, they conquered the Greeks. They also had many Greek slaves because the Greeks had set up colonies in Italy. And so when those places were conquered even earlier, as we know from last year, through much of history, slavery was mostly based on prisoners of war. When people were captured by enemy soldiers, they became slaves of the other side rather than putting them in a prison or killing them, which was seen as, a violation to kill somebody who had surrendered. But they don't go free; they become a slave. That was the norm in many societies. And so those Greek slaves that they often had them as tutors for their children. When they conquered the actual Greek world itself, they took in more of Greek culture. And so a lot of Roman culture absorbed Greek culture and became kind of an extension of it. And so we talk about this Greco-Roman world. Are there gonna be questions? Are the questions gonna be about their culture? Yeah, I think in part, you can have questions on the culture. You can have questions on the political structure. Definitely interaction between cultures. So the Pax Romana is a really good concept to think about. That idea that, and I think it extends. You can kind of project that same idea into similar contexts, where if the entire Mediterranean is under Roman rule, it's going to be a safe place for there to be trade, right? So if they didn't have control over the entire Mediterranean world, kind of encircling that Mediterranean Sea, conquering all the land around it, then there could be pirates, there could be enemy invasions, right? If the Romans control the entire thing, then it's going to be a safe place for them to conduct business, conduct trade, transport people, move things back and forth. And so that if everyone knows it's safe, it's easy to do this kind of trade, it's going to grow, it's going to flourish, and that's going to increase the economy. And because they control such a large area, the types of things they want to be trading, right? Like there are some valuable things that only exist in Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. There are other things that exist in Britain, right? Britain had a lot of tin. or whatever it is, whatever the good is, whatever the product is, you can be moving that all around the empire through trade, and that's going to increase the economy because you have such a large empire. You don't even need to go beyond the borders of the empire to trade. Of course, they did anyway, and there were plenty of things they got from the Silk Road, plenty of things they got from sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East. But even within that empire, there's going to be a massive amount of trade, and that's going to lead to more cultural diffusion. That's going to lead to more wealth. And that same concept can be applied elsewhere when we think about, for example, the Mongols. When the Mongols conquer this large territory, it's often referred to as the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol piece, because you had a similar situation. They controlled a large area, connected different regions that had different goods, different commodities that would be desired in different parts of the empire, and they can trade with each other. It's safe. It's relatively peaceful, other than the Black Death, which is another story. And that's actually a good thing too. During the Roman period, trade even then facilitated trade and movement, right? Military movement facilitated the movement of diseases. Chapter 12 in your textbook goes into that a lot in this period, in period 2. But we know for sure that, that's most famously in the post-classical period, in period 3, the Black Death that spread through this revitalized Silk Road trade. I won't get too into that because that's next week's stuff. We're kind of coming to the end. So if you have do you have any good videos to help write essays? Do you have any tips on essay writing, especially thesis statements? That is a great question. Excuse me. So actually the video, I didn't post it yet, but I'll post it for you guys on the page, mrgeezyhistory.com/AP World Review. The guy who does the videos for the first set that you guys did, the required ones, he has a couple of videos he has 3 videos, one on the SAQ, one on the LEQ, and one on the DBQ. And he goes, it's stuff that we've talked about before. I don't think he's saying anything super novel, super new. My intention is to post this recording. Let me finish the previous question. So those videos are, I could put them up today for you guys. And I plan to mention them anyway, but you can start checking them out now. And if you have additional questions about them, we can talk about it. But they go into they're about 15 minutes each, I think. Maybe not even for some of them, just like what are the structure of those essays and those type of questions, and how can you try to address them? And hopefully that will give you like a good overview, and then we can go deeper from there. I'm planning in class, because we're doing all of this online stuff, you guys have the 2 sets of videos. You have the Q&A with me on Sundays. Hopefully, don't forget, guys, for those of you who are still on, I still have 12 people. This Wednesday and this Friday after school, the plan is to do review after school as well. So we can do this on a larger scale. It'll be a little bit easier. Hopefully I'll get better at this and I can show you guys more videos and more pictures and images as we talk. But definitely after school, I'll pull up maps and things like that. We can go over things in more depth. And then in class too, we're going to be doing review. And because we're doing all this outside stuff on content, I really want to focus in class on skills, especially answering SAQs, especially writing essays, doing thesis statements and things like that. As many times as we've gone over it, we need to still keep going over it more. And yes, I am planning on posting this recording. I'm going to set up a page for us probably on YouTube. I will let you guys know once there's a live link for that. Possibly when we do this again next week, it will auto post and live stream directly onto YouTube. It's something that you can do with Zoom. I just didn't have that set up for today. But maybe for next week, I'll live stream directly onto YouTube and then it'll save there. So hopefully in the next day or 2, I'll post this recording for everybody. So anyone who didn't get to watch can do so. But, I think at the highest point today, we had maybe 15 people on. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your Sunday to do this. I hope that next week we can get more people. I wanted this week to be kind of an introductory thing for you guys, for me as well. But I hope that you guys benefited from this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. I'd like to see even more people. Maybe we can double or triple the amount of people who are getting on. So I don't have to talk as long about each question. I'll be more brief if I know that I'm getting a lot of questions. We can answer, because I think next week you guys are going to have a lot more questions because you guys are doing the third and the fourth periods. So basically the rest of ninth grade. And there's a lot more there in the periods 1 and 2. All this early civilizations, there's differences, but they're broadly similar. Even the classical civilizations from Persia to Rome, you have similar issues about consolidation, centralization, bureaucracy, how they run things, their connection to trade, their connection to religion, law codes, a lot of very similar kind of conversations. It's about knowing what is the Roman version of consolidation. And we wrote an essay on that last year, right? That's one of my favorite, it's probably my favorite essay we do in AP in ninth grade, is how governments expand and consolidate their power. When we get to the post-classical period, period 3, there's a whole lot going on because we're talking about the Muslim world. We're talking about China. We're talking about Rome. We're talking about Europe, Africa. When we get into the period 4, post-Columbus, we're all over the place. So there's a lot for next week. Can you pass a test without knowing ninth material? No. You got to review this stuff. So come on Wednesday, come on Friday. I think you could pass a test without knowing a lot about. So periods 1 and 2, the ones we just reviewed, are the least on the test. That doesn't mean they're not on the test. It just means that it's the least volume. But 3 and 4, from 600 to now, 600 to 1750, you got to know that stuff, especially 4. I mean 3 too, but 4 is post Columbus, slavery, the Enlightenment, absolutism, the Mughals, the Ottomans. There's a lot of stuff. So I think we can kind of end here more or less, but make sure that you guys are keeping up with the review. I'll post you. I'll give you guys already have the packets actually for 3 and 4. So while we will have homework this week, if you guys want to start on the next chunk of the review, you have it available to you. Everything is there for you, the videos and stuff. So if there are topics that today, even after this Q&A, you guys should all be taking notes. What are the things I need to study? What are the things I need to figure out before this test? What am I struggling on? You have the initial videos you have to watch, but you have that secondary video that you can click on those. You can click on those timestamps in the description on YouTube, and you can get specific, right, tailored to you, review on that specific topic. He does videos that are like 2 hours long or more. So you get a lot there. And then you have this. So the more prepared you come to the Q&A, the more specific questions you can ask, the more I can be helpful to you. And then after school as well, Wednesdays and Fridays. So I think we'll wrap it up here. Went a little bit over, but thank you guys again for being here. Make sure that you have your organizers filled out for Monday. If you have any advice for me about how to make this better, please share it with me. Let me know in class. Let me know by email. No problem, Chico. All right, thanks, Chica. Thank you guys for being a part of this. I'm glad that you came. If you thought it was good, please tell your classmates, guys. There are people who didn't come today who, if you're home, if you're available, it's tell them how easy it was to log on. Tell them how easy it was to ask questions. And is it always 3 p.m.? I don't, do you want it to always be 3 p.m.? It's probably gonna be, if not 3 p.m., it's gonna probably be close to 3 p.m. I don't think it'll be any earlier than 2 or later than maybe like 5:36. I might adjust the time slightly, make it a little bit earlier, a little bit later, just to accommodate some people said I'm not available until 4 or at 4:30. So maybe next week I'll do it at like 4:30. The week after, maybe I'll do it 2:30. I'll try to poll you guys again and see what time people are available. But again, it's always posted for you guys. And I put on Instagram today. I didn't give anybody a heads up about this, but I put on Instagram in my stories what questions do you have? Because if you were unable to participate today, but you have a question you want me to address, let me know, and I'll try to squeeze it in. I'll give priority to the people who were able to, who came to the thing. But if you have questions that you want me to address, I'm happy to talk about them in this. And I think next week it'll be shorter descriptions of things, because we'll get more questions, and we'll be able to bounce back and forth from a lot of topics. So yeah, please spread the word, guys. Try to encourage your classmates to jump on next week. And I hope to see you guys after school on Wednesday and Friday. All right. Peace out. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you on Monday.